Welcome back to Nightmare Flashbacks. On this week's episode, we're going to be diving into yet another Jack the Ripper SOV film, and that would be the Tom Savini starring film, The Ripper. So strap in as we dive into the obscure. We discussed Night Ripper on last week's episode of Nightmare Flashbacks, and everybody's like, oh, you need to watch The Ripper. Even when I picked this up last month or the month before that, whenever I got it, the Gauzer released a very fantastic looking Blu-ray and VHS copy of The Ripper. They're doing the same thing for another Christopher Lewis directed film, which is Blood Cult, which I am super excited. I'm actually getting the VHS copy and the Blu-ray of that. People were telling me that I needed to watch The Ripper. It was far better than Night Ripper, and I am standing tall and telling you that I fundamentally disagree with that statement. I think The Ripper is a far worse film. I think people are misremembering and kind of taking all of the fondness for this movie, and it's because the last 10 minutes are pretty good. I think it ends on a high note for an SOV film. I think Tom Savini does a fantastic job portraying the Ripper in this film. He literally is mustache twirling in this film, and I really like him in this role. However, that is where the goodness stops. Other than I think the kills are pretty good, and I think the effects are very well done. I think the throat slashing is good, and I think all the intestines work is very fantastic. But other than that, I don't like anything about this movie. But before we get into what I like and what I don't like, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the film, and then we'll discuss a little bit further. An old antique ring turns a college professor into a homicidal maniac when he puts it on. The ring originally belonged to Jack the Ripper, and the Ripper's spirit possesses whoever wears it. This is the one aspect of the film that I really like. I like the concept of this being Jack the Ripper himself and not somebody copycatting Jack the Ripper or just kind of a more modern take on Jack the Ripper like Night Ripper was. So that's the one aspect I really like. We get that in the latter part of this film when Richard, our professor, is talking to another professor who is clearly trying to conceal that he is doing a very bad Coke product placement. He literally is like, would you like some Coke? So I was looking for a little bit of charm in this movie. Unfortunately, it is what most SOV films are. It's boring. It's not shot well. It's terribly acted. I like Christopher Lewis a lot as a director, especially in the genre of film. Like I said, he did Blood Cult. And as Tom Savini himself would say in a new interview, he has 29 films that are bad and 34 films that he believes are good. Now, in our neck of the woods, bad sometimes means good, but in this aspect, I would agree, and he agrees that this is part of that 29. I don't think this movie is good, and I just don't think it's fun. I don't think it's funny at all. I just think it's kind of boring. The characters are bad across the board, especially that Steve, motherfucker. Steve, oh my God, dude, I almost shut this shit off. With Steve. I was like, if he calls this professor one more time, I think he's actually in love with the professor. I'm going to be honest. He's so distraught, spoilers, that his girlfriend gets killed by the Ripper, but he keeps constantly calling his professor. He shows up on him. He's just there all the time. And I was like, man, I think Steve might be in love with the professor. He was in love with movies. He really likes the same type of movies. His girlfriend could have no idea what he's talking about, and she doesn't give a shit that he's really into these old horror movies, and I think that's a red flag for a relationship. Now, personally, my wife could give two shits about any of this also, but, you know, I don't know. It could be a red flag. Maybe it's a giant red flag for me as well. But anyway, I think it's a red flag, and then he's like all distraught when she's gone. He literally tries to be like, hey, watch this film with me, and she's like, yeah, but I don't care about this movie. And then again, he's still trying to get her to watch this movie. I'm like, bro, move on. You're lucky she's sleeping with you. She doesn't want to watch your bad movies. Nobody wants to watch Theater of Blood. I mean, we get it. You like old horror movies, but Theater of Blood is not a great movie. Anyway, just because Vincent Price is in it doesn't mean it's amazing. Oh God, I don't know, man. Steve kind of threw me off, and we're just talking about it now, and I'm just thinking about how much I despise Steve. He made me hate this whole entire movie. Even though the last 10 minutes is great, Steve ruined the whole movie. You know, just some characters can really, resonate with you, and you remember them, and even if the movie's not so great, you're like, yeah. but that one character was fantastic, and they made me really like the movie. I don't like the movie overall, but I like that character. Steve was the opposite of that. While Tom Savini is on one hand of the scale, where he's like, okay, I left being like, Tom Savini is a great Jack the Ripper. He's literally mustache twirling in the end, and that's fantastic. Steve is the other end of that pendulum where it's just swinging, and I wanted to chop off my head because it was so bad. His acting is bad. His delivery is bad. The dialogue is bad. It's just, I don't know. The main character is also bad. I think that our professor is bad. Tom Schreier is also bad in this film. He's not very good. His delivery is very stilted and wooden, like all the other characters in this movie, like a typical SOV film is. But I don't know. There was just a charm to Night Ripper that I really liked, and that is not here. It's not found at all. I think other than the ring concept, I was more intrigued by him just buying the damn brass headboard. Just buy the damn headboard. Why is this the part that I remember in this movie? Why is there such an importance on this brass headboard? I get it. This woman wants a brass headboard. Now we get it. Maybe this guy's just an asshole and doesn't want to buy the brass headboard. That's more on his relationship, but I don't know. That's what I thought about when the movie ended. I was like, Steve sucks, and I'm glad that woman finally got her brass headboard. Even though her boyfriend died, at the end, it's all good because she got her damn brass headboard. The movie follows our professor. He finds this old ring at an antique store, and he is just fascinated by it. But once he puts it on, he can't get it off, and he begins to lose time and gets very tired. And then you later find out that he was literally becoming Jack the Ripper to slay women in a very similar nature to Jack the Ripper himself. So again, I like the kills. I think they're pretty good. The effects are pretty good. Like I said, the acting is bad, but I went into this knowing the acting would be bad because that's a lot of these movies, but it was worse than I thought it would be. And I think a lot of the scenes and shot compositions are also bad, whereas I actually was surprised by how well shot Night Ripper was. I think it looked good. It looked like a movie. That's the difference, okay? So I think Night Ripper looks like a movie that just happened to be shot on video, whereas this looks like a shot on video movie. I think that's the difference, you know? If somebody was to show me this and like, hey, you know, our friend Dave, he made this, I'd be like, yeah, that looks like Dave made it. Whereas you're like, hey, this is some guy we don't know. It's at a film. I think that's kind of the difference here is that felt more like a movie. It had more of a structure, but it just had a charm to it. I think the music carried a lot of that because in the scenes, it was like actually carrying the weight of the scene sometimes. But this here, The Ripper, it's just, I like the very opening of the film where we get the cut back to, you know, Jack the Ripper himself. But damn, that scene was long. It was like 5 minutes of this girl being like, I'm like, oh my God, just kill this bitch already. What are we doing? And he finally does. And I mean, that's good. But other than that, I think it meanders a lot. There's a lot of scenes where people are calling each other on the phone. And there's like, hey, professor, did you know the movie's on? Everybody's getting answering machine messages in this film. There's a scene where, you know, our professor is literally listening to his answering machine. I was like, you couldn't be bothered to write anything? This is the script. It says, in the script, it said, answer machine scene. And that's what he does. He just listens to his answering machine. And then everybody's constantly calling. I get it. Answering machines were a big thing in 1986. Phones, cool. We got landlines. That's awesome. And I think that's the difference. While Night Ripper is not a great film, I never found myself bored. I thought it was always interesting. We were always getting new characters, and this just fell flat for me. I don't think it's better than Night Ripper at all, and most of you may disagree with me. Let me know down in the comments which one you like better. But I was looking for something a little more than what I got. And people kept telling me that The Ripper was better, but I think they're just remembering, and they're remembering the last 5 minutes of the movie where things escalate and it gets pretty cool. Steve shows up. For some reason, he's mad at the professor because his girlfriend's dead, even though I think he's in love with the professor. They have everything in common. It makes sense. But anyway, he pulls a gun on him. Like, Steve, you literally pulled this gun out of a paper bag. And you're like, yep, I'm ready to kill. Revenge. Another Christopher Lewis movie, which is pretty good. Revenge. Anyway, so he shows up at the professor's house, and miraculously his Porsche doesn't start, so we're left for him to be there. Steve shows up. He's ready to go down. The professor overtakes him, steals his car, goes to this warehouse because now he is full on The Ripper. The showdown begins as his girlfriend Carol shows up to try and figure out who he is because Steve has called her and been like, yo, he's trying to kill you. He's The Ripper. She's like, what are you talking about? He's not The Ripper. I got this headboard. It showed up. They have the showdown. This is where Tom Savini really shines. He's twirling his mustache. He looks great as Jack the Ripper. But other than that, I think this movie is boring and wildly disappointing. But that's pretty much all I've got. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of you like this movie more than I did. And I went in, and maybe that's my problem. I went in with high expectations because against the last film that I watched, everybody's like, no, this is far better. Far better. It's a bad movie, but it's far better than that one. And I just do not agree at all. The music was bad. It was shot bad. The acting's bad. All around it's bad. So if Tom Savini hadn't been in this movie, so let me ask you that. You take Tom Savini out of this movie, what are you left with? Not much. So I'll end my ranting about Steve and the poor acting and the semi-decent kills. But overall, I don't think The Ripper is very good. And I think if you own it, awesome. I think it's still a cool movie. DeGauser puts out great stuff. And I think it's still a cool piece of like cult movie, like SOV films that I'm happy to own because it's something that I had never seen before and I really wanted to watch it. And again, and in contrast to Night Ripper, I thought it was a fun back-to-back week of watching movies and talking about them with you. If you have any other Jack the Ripper style movies that are in this genre, let me know down below because I will look at them. Next week, we're going to take a little bit of a detour because I'm tired of watching movies based on Jack the Ripper. But anyway, we could watch the Alfred Hitchcock one, his very first movie, but I've seen that before, so I don't know that that's any better either. But I do have a couple things. I might do a poll this week to kind of see what you guys are interested in watching. I've pulled out a couple movies. Midnight 2, we discussed Midnight earlier in the channel, earlier this year. And then I've also got the Amityville Curse, another one that I want to look at because it's an Amityville film that I've never seen. That's a little older. So there's a number of films, Flesh Merchant, Death Magic. There's a lot of films that I've got that I think, Video Murders. There's a lot of things that I think I could watch in this style that I'm just on an SOV kick, and I think it's fun. You know, we might do this for a while and then move along to some more well-known films in this genre. But that's all I've got. I'm going to link some videos for you at the end, so check out Night Ripper. You see my thoughts on that. Leave a comment below. Share this with anybody you know that likes weird and obscure horror movies. And if you like what we do here, consider becoming part of the collective. And I will talk to you guys on my next review.